as large as our mechanical engineering team, which may seem crazy for a car company, but that's part of what defines the car today. So we recruit in a balanced way from universities, students that are graduating fresh and coming in to work with us, and also pulling people that don't fit in always as well with the existing car companies that they're at or the existing large industries. And I think Tesla's become sort of almost an oasis for people that are really creative, that are kind of not comfortable in the sort of slower pace of a larger company. So that tends to be the DNA of the people that we attract.
If I can ask you to cast your eyes a bit farther into the future, how much will artificial intelligence play a role in terms of on both the energy side and the car side in terms of development of products?
Yeah, artificial intelligence is super exciting, and it's just changing at such a pace. It's hard to really even predict what an impact that's going to have. Maybe the point I'll touch on first is autonomous driving. That's something where the autonomous vehicles and the ability to use the processing capability that really didn't exist just a few years ago is going to change everything in a time frame much faster than people expect. The ability to do image recognition, the ability to network cars together and create databases of learned experiences and also just databases of the world, the roads, traffic conditions, even weather conditions, all these things, will end up making, cars independently much better drivers than people very, very quickly. If you think of just the amount of experience that the cars are getting, if you imagine them, personify them a little bit, our fleet of cars is, with autonomous technologies and the sensors enabling it, are driving, close to 1 million miles a day. And that's more than most customers would drive in a lifetime of driving. So in that short time period, they can encounter almost all the things that one human would encounter in a lifetime of driving. So imagine if you let that integrate for a few years, how smart of a driver that could be. They'd be better than any human could ever be. So it's a fascinating thing that's happening, where AI is going to have an ability to really augment the humans to make cars safer and more convenient.
How much is Tesla investing in AI?
Quite a lot, and it's something where in terms of our autonomous driving, that's really our largest investment, and we see that as something that is going to be transformational for cars in the future.
How far into the future will it be transformational?
Well, I don't want to give a specific date, but I think it will be much sooner than most people expect, and we're seeing
5 years, 10 years, longer?
Certainly less than 10 years.
And how would you define transformational within 10 years?
Transformational in that I think cars will basically be able to essentially prevent accidents. It's something today where so many accidents are caused by human error or distraction, and that's a fundamental thing that is largely avoidable. With technologies that are essentially in sight today, also offering a level of convenience that people just can't get from cars. There's so much wasted time sitting in traffic or sitting on the highway or going through city driving. We see all of that as something that can be automated in this near-term time frame.
Would you see a majority of vehicles on the road within a decade being autonomous?
It depends a lot on how fast other car companies will adopt this technology, and it's also going to be somewhat difficult to retrofit existing cars. So we have a fleet of cars in the world that's several billion vehicles. That's not something we can turn over overnight, or we can add technology into overnight. But I think you'll see an incredibly rapid integration of autonomous capability into new vehicles being sold. Just like we saw things like airbags or seatbelts before that, or like ABS systems. I think that's going to be the same type of wave of adoption that we'll see, except it will have much bigger societal impacts on transportation and parking and just time usage and city planning, many areas.
You work with a lot of governments around the world. How do the best ones keep pace with this fantastic but ferocious pace of change?
That's a good question, and again, it's a spectrum. But the best governments, I think, are those that are are constantly trying to look into the future and have some dedicated resources thinking about what the impacts of this will be, so that as they're making policy and as they're making recommendations or even investing in infrastructure, it can take some of this into consideration. Infrastructure especially has such a long lifetime that if we can get the design of it right today with some foresight, it can have huge benefits. And Ontario actually is quite forward-thinking in its autonomous vehicle and autonomous technology policy. So it's one of the, I think, leaders in the world in terms of being a testing ground and a place for that.
I think we can open it to questions now, as I said at the beginning, with number one.
Great. Hello. Thank you. My name is Anthony Wong. I'm CTO of eMotive. We're a Toronto company. My question for you is probably a thinly veiled pitch, but here goes. In the early days of Tesla, we know that you tried X-Track and Magna.
We're mindful of time, so we'll ask for sharp questions, please.
Sure. If I told you that we have a transmission which is better than any other, that is extremely efficient, shifts under load, shifts extremely smoothly, and does not require auxiliary power, would you be interested in having a more competitive powertrain for the future of electric vehicles? You see transmissions as being a part of that. And can we talk about this later?
Well, I mean, one of the benefits of electric vehicles, though, I see, is actually not needing a transmission. I do think that's a fundamental benefit. So, having a single speed where you can, not have to shift at all and not have to, do that mass acceleration or deceleration is a benefit. But perhaps, yeah, we can talk later.
That would be great.
Number two, please.
Yes, my question relates to hydrogen. We see Toyota seems to be moving in the direction of hydrogen, yet Tesla is not all that in favor of it. It seems like a hybrid between hydrogen and lithium has all kinds of potential. I just wonder if you can explain the position of hydrogen to us.
Sure. In a nutshell, I'm really not in favor of a hydrogen type of economy, and it's something that we've looked at for a while, and it's something where the technology has constantly been a few years in the future for the last probably 20 years. But fundamentally, the efficiency of that whole energy pathway is just not very good. It uses about 3 times as much primary energy to send into the process to create the hydrogen, to compress it, to transport it, and to then react it through a fuel cell and move a car, as you would if you just made the electricity, charged a battery, and ran an electric vehicle. And secondarily, the infrastructure is a real problem. Electricity has one of the most pervasive infrastructures in the world today, and commonly people worry about the charging infrastructure problem. But that's really just making a cord that goes from the electricity grid, which is already near the road, directly to a plug on a vehicle. Hydrogen doesn't exist in a transportation landscape. You have to figure out how you're going to get it to these points of refueling. Then you have to build a refueling station. So, to me, I just don't see a commercial future for hydrogen vehicles really any time. And if you look at the improvement curves on batteries, I think they will end up eclipsing the range and the refuel time for hydrogen vehicles before hydrogen is even on the market. So I'm not not very bullish in hydrogen technology, but I know we disagree strongly with Toyota on that.
Right. Number 3, please.
Hi, JB. My name is Eric Coverdale of Gorkon Industries, and I tried to build a project with the Tesla Powerwall back in October, and I'm still waiting for delivery on that. I was wondering if you might be able to give some insight on when you might be able to actually come and deliver some of these units.
Well, we are shipping them around the world. I assume your project is here in Ontario, but I know there's several different distributors that we work with here in Ontario. Several of those are I think, being installed in the region now. But I know we are backlogged. The demand has been really high, and we're ramping up production and deliveries about as fast as we can. So I would expect people ordering Powerwalls now should be able to get them in less than a few months.
Okay. Yeah, they won't even take a purchase order still from me though. So hopefully, I'll give you my card. We can work something out.
Right, let's go. I don't see a number 4 mic, so we'll come back to number 1.
Hi, David Tickall, University of Toronto. Question about self-driving cars as a service. which appears to be a different business model than Tesla appears to be pursuing, and would also require probably different kinds of vehicle designs and marketing strategies. So wondering, where Tesla sits on that issue, and whether it has any plans to move in that direction.
Well, I can't say too much about sort of what we would or wouldn't be planning on something like that, but fundamentally we're putting our focus right now on innovating and developing the technology, making sure the vehicles are able to have a roadmap toward being autonomous. To us, that's the first building step. Until you have a fleet of cars that can be autonomous, you can't have the business case that can use them. So that's where we put our initial focus is on that sensor technology roadmap and the onboard computing roadmap.
Good. Number 2.
So a big part of the point of starting Tesla was to curb the adoption of people using petroleum so that we could ameliorate global warming. Do you think that the rate at which we're adopting electric vehicles is going to be fast enough to actually make an impact, or is it kind of a lost cause at this point?
Well, it can never be a lost cause. I hope we can never feel that way. I think as a society that would be a really depressing time. But is it fast enough? No. And I think it needs to be much faster, and it can't be just Tesla. Even if we built a million or several million vehicles per year, and we will one day, but even at that rate, it isn't enough. We need to get to a place where essentially all the vehicles being produced are electric and are not burning fossil fuels. To have any hope of transitioning toward a place that meets the climate agreements of that we discussed here in Ontario, but around the world, and that's not that many years away. It's sort of amazing to me that we can make those predictions about not using fossil fuels in just a few decades, but then we can look at growth rates of the technologies that do it, and not sort of be surprised that they need to be so much faster.
Did the drop in oil prices last year change your thinking?
It hasn't really changed our thinking very much. And actually, when we started Tesla, the price of oil was less than $30 a barrel. And many people sort of don't remember that, but we were looking at the long-term trends of energy storage and how batteries were continuing to improve every single year. And we know the price of oil is going to be volatile. It may be low one year, it may be low for a few years, but the long term, the pressure of climate change and this, the fact that oil is a finite resource are going to force this change.
Now let's go back to number 3.
Hi, JB. My name is Darren Chung. I'm a research technology in the federal government. My question, I have 2 questions. First is, at some point there will be an inflection where the overall system cost of renewable energy and battery systems will be lower than traditional fossil fuels without subsidies. At what point do you see that happening? And it makes no sense to create new projects in fossil fuels. And the second question is, for those of us that lined up for the Model 3, do we expect to be able to get our cars next year?
Well, it depends on where you are in line, but we definitely will start production next year and deliver a pretty sizable number of cars. And to your first question, that's a good one. It's already happening. And we already see places where renewables plus storage are cheaper than their fossil fuel equivalent. We see that happening in island nations or in slightly more remote regions. Anywhere that has to import fossil fuel as an energy resource tends to already be more expensive than just using local renewables and storage. So for instance, in Hawaii is one good example. We're doing a really fascinating project there with a 50 megawatt hour battery system. It will be the biggest battery in North America, combined with a utility scale solar plant, that essentially can provide base load power to one of the islands in Hawaii. And that's all happening at lower cost than the fossil fuel equivalent. So that there's no reason that can't continue to scale. But what we're going to see is kind of a spectrum. As the sort of higher cost applications start to fall to renewables and storage, and that's going to move more and more toward the larger and more mainstream parts of the grid.
There is a mic 4, I understand. I'm sorry we can't see it from up here, but if you have a question, please.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm I'm Puneet from India. I'm here as part of a delegation to Seneca College. I wanted to ask you, what is Tesla's take on making autonomous vehicles work in countries like India, where the traffic conditions are haphazard and the concepts of lane don't really exist?
Yeah, certainly it's it's a challenging situation, and there's places even in North America where there's similar challenges, but it will eventually be overcome though. If a human can do it by looking visually at the situation, recognizing what's happening with the cars around you and the movements of those cars, it's something we can train a computer to do. It won't be the first application, but imagine a car that can have multiple cameras, more eyes looking in more directions than any human can. That has the chance to be a better driver, no matter what.
We've got just 5 minutes left, so we'll have to cycle through quickly. Number one.
Hey JB, Stephen Trim here. It kind of touches on that point is, as we have more miles and more data being collected, there's still the question of ethics and what route a computer will take when there's 3 lives in a car versus 1 on the road and vice versa. And it's not directed at Tesla, it's really at every lobbying group that's being formed now, is what do you think the future is for dictating that decision?
Well, I think data is going to end up telling us this, and at some point, we'll have, we as an industry will have the statistical proof that some autonomous system or collection of systems is safer than when they're enabled versus when they are not enabled, and that's, I think, the best way to make those decisions. And it's not a sort of question of dictates or ethics or anything like that. But if you have several billion miles of driving, and you can look at the accident data and say these billion miles are safer than these billion miles, clearly we'll want to use that system. Just like today, airbags still cause some harm. There's definitely dangers in having airbags, but I think everybody understands that you're much better off having an airbag, even despite some of those dangers, than not having it. I believe we'll have a similar situation with autonomous technology.
Thank you. Number two.
So, Daniel Chu here. I'm really fascinated about the Tesla factory. Is full automation something that you guys are striving for, like a factory running 24/7, or is it a possibility?
Well, there's certain areas of the factory that basically do run 24/7. Just as little downtime for maintenance as you can manage it. But it's a trade-off with the cost of labor in different regions, and we do really all of our manufacturing in the U.S. or North America generally, and the cost of labor here is relatively high. So that forces us to be more creative on automation, and I think if you're manufacturing in China or Thailand or Vietnam or something, that kind of gives you this excuse where you don't have to think as hard about automation. But fundamentally, the cost of labor is going up everywhere in the world. The value of human time is going to go up. So automation is a critical future.
Thank you. Number three.
Hi JB, Terry De Silva from the CEO of Charitech. Love your vehicles, love Tesla. Question: when Henry Ford chose gas over electricity to drive cars, he created this problem of smog and all the other attendant problems that go along with gasoline engines. What about lithium batteries? How do you dispose of them, and will they be toxic? Will they cause us another problem in the future? And where is lithium essentially mined?
Yeah, good question. And the interesting difference with lithium-ion batteries from gasoline is they're not consumed in the operation of the vehicle. They're charged and recharged, hundreds, thousands of times throughout the life of the vehicle. But when the car is dead, when the battery is dead at its end of life, every single material that you put into the battery when you made it is still there. And that's a pretty interesting thing. In a gasoline car, you put in hundreds and hundreds of pounds of gasoline, and then you burned it and you spit it out into the atmosphere. But with the battery, you put in some nickel, you put in some lithium, and it never went away. It's still there. So to me, this is actually a really exciting area of innovation, is inventing the reprocessing technologies. I won't even call it recycling, because it's really just reprocessing, of taking an old battery and refurbishing it, reprocessing it into a new battery. This is going to be the cheapest way to make new batteries, and we already have several teams working on this material reprocessing at the Gigafactory, where we'll take in all of the old car batteries and use them as feedstock to purify, refine into new materials to make new batteries.
I'm sorry, we're going to have time for only one more question. I'll go back to number 4 since we skipped over you earlier.
My name is Jack Mena. I'm a renewable energy technician student from Niagara College. I have a question regarding your lithium battery. I want to know how you think the electric car is better for the environment when I've seen firsthand the damage your lithium mines cause.
Well, the lithium is generally coming from, sort of a salt extraction process, and we try pretty hard to make sure that all the suppliers, that we use, all the way back to the mining process, are not doing environmental damage. It's something that I think we take really seriously as much as we can, and it's not perfect today, but it's something we'll keep investing in improving. The major impact though from cars is the emissions that they create while driving, and anytime you're making an object, whether it's a gasoline car or an electric vehicle, there's some impact that has to get managed in the material extraction and then in the manufacturing of the car. But fundamentally, we know that there's a huge benefit in the lifetime operation of an electric car versus a gasoline car. So that's what gives us the confidence that we're going in the right direction. We just have to make sure that we keep taking care and being very diligent in the way that we're going in that direction, so it can scale without ever making anything worse.
This has been a fascinating conversation, JB. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you to the audience as well.
Thanks, John.